P 8.7. On January 1st, 2020, Harder Wholesales had accounts receivable of 139,000, notes receivable 25,000, and allowance for doubtful accounts 13,200. The note receivable is from Wellington Company. It is a 4-month, 9% note dated December 31st, 2019. Harder prepares financial statements usually at December 31st. During the year, the following selected transactions occurred, and we are supposed to journalize these transactions. Okay, so let's see the first one. We don't have the year, do we? 2020, right? Okay, so on January 5th, sold 20,000 of merchandise to Sheldon Company, terms N15. Here, just like I said before in my previous videos, if it doesn't ask you to accrue interest or to collect the note in full, that means that you don't have to calculate any kind of interest at this point. You just have to record that you received a note or the accounts receivable. In this case, it's sold merchandise, right? So over here at the credit side, we're gonna have sales revenue because this money was generated through a sale that I made to Sheldon Company. And here, even though you're gonna see N15, you don't see any percentage, right? Like for example, here we have 8%. We don't see any percentage in A in January 5th. And the reason why we don't see that is because this is not a note. This is accounts receivable. And you have to be careful with that because since we are studying notes receivable, now you might think that all of the answers are notes receivable, not necessarily. In this case, it is just accounts receivable. And it is 20,000 on both of them, like this. Okay. Next one, January 20, 2020. Accepted Sheldon's 20,000 3-month 8% note for balance due. Yeah, in this case, it is definitely a note receivable, right? So we're going to debit notes receivable. And here it says for a balance due, which means that previously this was an accounts receivable, right? So we have to decrease this accounts receivable. We are replacing this original accounts receivable for a note. So that's why we are debiting notes receivable. February 18 of 2020. Sold 8,000 of merchandise to Petchwary Company and accepted Petchwary's 8,000 6-month 9% note for the amount due. In this case, it is the same thing. We got a note, so we have to debit notes receivable, and we sold merchandise, 8,000 of merchandise. So it is a sale, so it has to be sale revenue, and the value is 8,000 for both of them. And then we have April 20, collected Sheldon note in full. Well, every time you have to make an entry about a collection or accrual of interest, always make a timeline. Is the best thing that you can do, because otherwise you might get a little bit lost. We're talking about Sheldon note, right? They talk about Sheldon on January 1st and January 20, right? You have to be careful because remember that for January 5th, this is just an accounts receivable. It starts on January 20. That's when they actually got the note. So we have to start counting on January 20. And it is a 3-month note, right? So here I'm going to make 1, 2, and 3. So it starts on January 20, February 20, March 20, and that's why here we are at April 20, right? And since the note was made on January 10, 20, and today on April 20, we are collecting the note in full, that means that there's no interest accrued, right? I'm receiving the full value without any problems, okay? So what is the original value? The note is 20,000 and then 8%, 3 months, okay? So here we're gonna have 20,000 times 0.08 times 3 divided by 12. Something here that I want to point out, a lot of students make this mistake because the note is 3 months, right? So this number over here is just because we're calculating in terms of month. So what I mean by that is that regardless if the note is a 12-month note, a 3-month note, in this case a 3-month note, or a 6-month note, this one, as long as we're talking about months, this one is always going to be 12. If we're talking about days, this one is always going to be 360. So the denominator over here does not change. It's always the one talking about the full number of months or number of dates in a year, and this is the one that actually changes. Okay, and that is, oops, and that is 400. So for us to journalize this entry over here, it says the note in full, right? So that means that we're going to receive the full thing. So cash has to go up, right? Because I'm going to receive the value, the original value of the note plus all of the interest and stuff. And notes receivable has to go down because we will no longer have a note. This note is going to be paid in full. And then over here, we are going to have interest revenue. The original amount of the note was 20,000. The revenue that we got was 400, so in total I would have 20,400. Some of you might be wondering, but this entry over here, I've seen some cases where we also have interest revenue, and then we have interest receivable, and then we have notes revenue, right? You will have interest revenue and receivable if you have an accrual of interest. If you collect a note in full without any problem, in this case we're collecting in full, you wouldn't have any receivables. You would just have the revenue that you generated from accepting this note in the first place, and this is why the entry looks like this. Okay, and then April 30, receive payment in full from the Wellington Company on amount due. Well, here they don't say anything about Wellington, right? But they said it on the beginning. Here they said that the note receivable is from Wellington Company. It is a 4-month, 9% note dated on December 31st, 2019. We don't have the principal amount. We actually do, because here they said that in the beginning, he had notes receivable 25,000, and it said that the note received, which means that there's only one note, and this note is about Wellington Company, which means that this is the amount that we are going to be using. Okay, so one more time, let's make the timeline for us to understand it better. The Wellington note was a 4-month note, and it started on December 31st of 2019. So here we're gonna have January 31st of 2020, February 31st of 2000. Well, there's no February 31st, right? But in theory, it would be this. March 31st of 2020 and April 31st of 2020. Not all months have 31 days. That's why you're going to see some difference here. It says April 30. Well, they're referring to the due date, which it would be somewhere here. That's because, for example, February does not have 31 months, right? And one of these two does not have 31 days, and this is why it would look like this. Anyways, here we're gonna have the payment in full, right? So the same thing as before, there was no problem. We're not accruing anything. So the original amount is 25,000, and then we're gonna multiply by 9%, and it is a 4-month. Okay, so that would be 25,000 multiplied by 9%, and it is a 4-month note. That is approximately 750. So the entry that we're going to be making on April 30 is very similar to the one that we just made before, because we collect in full. So again, cash goes up, note receivable goes down because we're not gonna have this note anymore, and interest revenue is credited by the value of 750. Here it is 25,000. And over here we would have 25,750. Okay. Next we have May 25 accepted Potter Incorporations 7,000 3 months 7% note in settlement of a past due balance on account. Okay, past due balance on account. So that means that I got a note, and that was because of an account receivable that I had in the past. So I am exchanging this account receivable for a note. So accounts receivable has to go down, and note receivable has to go up because I am receiving this note in exchange of this previous amount due, and the value was 6,000. August 18 received payment in full from the petuary on note due. Okay, which one is the petuary? This one, right? Okay, so let's make a timeline for this one. It is February. It starts on February 18, and it is a 6-month note, and we are going to be accruing this on August 18. Okay. So you guys actually made a mistake here with the months. I forgot the month of April and May. This is actually how the timeline is supposed to look like, and this is why here we're gonna have 8,000, which is the original value, right over here, 8,000, 9%, 6 months. So over here we would have 8,000, 9%, 6 months out of 12, and this is 360. So for the interest revenue we would have 360, the original note amount, which is 8,000, and the cash, which is the sum of all of them, 8,360. Next, we're gonna have August 25th. The Potter Incorporation note was dishonored. Okay, so he did not pay. Potter is not bankrupt. Future payment is anticipated. Every time a note is dishonored, there are two type of entries that we can make. If we think that they are not going to pay us anymore, then we're going to have to debit that to allowance or doubtful accounts, right? But if we think that they are going to pay us, in this case, Potter is not bankrupt. Future payment is anticipated. Then that means that I know that I have this amount to be receivable in the future, which means that we're going to debit what? We're going to debit accounts receivable, because we believe that even though I did not get this money right now, I will get it someday, because the customer to which I sold my merchandise is not broke, so I expect this money someday. So notes receivable go down, and here we're gonna have interest revenue. Yes, why? Because I believe that this guy is going to pay me in the future, right? And when he does, I'm going to have revenue. It's just that I'm not gonna receive this money now, and I don't know when I'm gonna receive it, but I believe that I will receive it. And when I receive it, I will also have accumulated some revenue. So the original amount was 6,000, and over here we have the Potter Incorporated 6,000, 7%, and it is a 3-month note. So we're gonna multiply by 0.07, 3 divided by 12. That is 105. The original note was 6,105, so that would be 6,105. Last one, September 1st, sold 12,000 of merchandise to Stan's Broth company and accepted a 12,000 6-month 10% note for the amount due. Well, again, here we have a lot of information. We have the percentage, the time, the value of the note, but it did not ask us to accrue or to collect the value in full. It just said that we received this note in an exchange of a selling that we made, right? We sold some merchandise. So for this one, we don't have to calculate it for now. We just have to debit the notes receivable because we got this note from selling some merchandise, and therefore we would credit sales revenue, both 12,000.